Hello and welcome to our discussion today. I'm a member of the Cardiovascular Psychophysiology Lab from the Department of Psychology at East Carolina University under the mentorship of Dr. Matthew Whited. Today we're going to be discussing coping with chronic illness. Our main goal for today is to look at total health, which we define under the biopsychosocial model. And we understand that for each individual, health is a makeup of biological, psychological, and social factors. So when we say biological, we're talking about things like physical health, genetic vulnerabilities, and perhaps disability or health issues. For psychological components, we think about things like self-esteem or confidence, coping skills, and social skills. And then from the social aspect, we think about support from family members, friends or peers, or other social support systems, for instance, school or education, or health resources. And we know that all of these factors combine or interact to make up our health situation and how we manage our health, how we cope with our health, or the issues that we're having. And particularly in this setting, so for those undergoing cardiovascular or pulmonary rehabilitation, we understand that getting better or rehabbing often involves all three of these aspects. And just as our health is comprised of multiple factors, as we mentioned, biological, psychological, and social, we also understand that coping requires acknowledgement or consideration of many of these factors as well. And like this quote states, coping with cardiovascular or pulmonary disease requires a menu of strategies. So there's no formula or magic coping style, no one magic strategy, but we understand that more strategies equals more success. So we want to consider a range or multitude of coping styles. And along with this, it's important to acknowledge that every individual is different, that every individual has a different set of biological, psychological, and social factors, as well as many other differences. And so the goal of today's talk is to really add strategies that work for you. So as we work through some of these next slides, to think about personalizing this information in a way that you can leave here today with strategies to try, or at least to test out to see if they'll work. Because we know that implementing these strategies is a skill. It's something that takes practice over time. And we want to start to give you the confidence and the knowledge to be adding these strategies to things that you're already doing to build upon increased coping strategies. So from this point forward, we want to focus on the psychological factors that influence health. And we know that one of the primary ways that this takes place is through coping. So we want to help to develop coping strategies, which are the ways in which we deal with adversity or life challenges, so that these coping strategies can address the new set of challenges that you're facing. And we know that for those of you who are currently in cardiovascular and pulmonary rehab, some of the new challenges include increased fatigue, maybe a loss of independence or decreased independence, which may look like inability to drive like you used to, or maybe go to the grocery store, or take care of daily tasks around the house. These are things that we would call examples of problem-focused coping. So maybe some ways that we want to work to solve these new challenges that we're facing. And in addition to this, we know that many emotional difficulties accompany this rehabilitation process. There's a lot of new challenges that are emotionally difficult. And so for those, we want to think through emotion-focused coping strategies to find ways or strategies to deal with difficult feelings. We know that people people often feel increased sadness or hopelessness, or maybe just anger or frustration, or simply just feeling stressed and overwhelmed about many of the new challenges that they're experiencing. So these are ways that we want to use emotion-focused coping. The first category of coping, as I had just mentioned, is problem-focused coping, which means taking some steps to solve the problem. So this is something that's likely familiar for you all, but it involves at times making a goal or a plan of action. And so we can see here some examples of ways to address the problems that we're currently experiencing. Some of these are making a plan of action, asking others how they dealt with a similar issue. We can alter the stressor or the environment in some way. We can also ask others to lend a helping hand or ask for help. Problem-focused coping may also include talking to your doctor about things that you can do to improve your health. So asking for some ways to implement some of these new skills or lifestyle behaviors. And also, we know that attending CVPR, or Cardiovascular and Pulmonary Rehabilitation, is a great way to address the problems that often accompany the rehabilitation process. So now that we've looked at this list of problem-focused coping examples, let's try a scenario together. You used to be able to help out a lot around the house, but now you're less able to do so. Your family hasn't stepped in to help fill the gap yet. So what should you do? This may be a good time to pause this recording if you need some extra time to either talk with your group or to come up with some examples of how you might work to solve this problem. For example, in this situation, you might consider having a conversation with your family members to explain the challenges that you're having. For instance, you could ask them to complete one of the chores for you that you used to complete, like doing the laundry, the dishes, or maybe taking care of the bills or the mail. You may also want to think about breaking down this goal into smaller parts. So you may not be able to help out around the house in the same capacity that you used to, but there may be some ways you can still help. And so you can find ways to do certain activities that are still possible for you, or you can break down your activities into smaller parts or steps so that you're not working on them as long if that has become an issue. And along with this, you may want to think of some other examples of situations where problem-focused coping would be effective in your own life. And so again, you may want to pause the video at this time to address some of these examples if necessary. So in addition to problem-focused coping, we can also focus on emotion-focused coping, which are efforts to reduce negative emotional consequences of a stressor. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by some of the challenges of the rehabilitation process, you may want to talk to a family member or friend, or maybe find a distraction through taking a walk, watching a favorite television program or radio program. You may want to practice relaxation or meditation activity, such as simply practicing taking some deep breaths, which can often help to provide relaxation. And something that we want to note is that avoidance coping can often be used here and is unhelpful for solving our problems. And so when we say avoidance coping, we're referring to denying that one is ill or is facing other obvious stressors. So in the moment, it may feel easier or more comfortable to deny or avoid some of the problematic emotions we're having, such as anger, frustration, sadness, or just a sense of feeling overwhelmed. But we want to encourage you to not avoid those, but to find helpful ways and safe ways to deal with these difficult emotions, such as those in the list. Also, at times, individuals refer to drugs and alcohol for for helping to deal with difficult emotions. And we want to, again, really encourage you to find ways outside of these options to deal with these emotions. So now that we've looked at some examples of emotion-focused coping, we have another scenario to go through together. While you were in the hospital, some paperwork and bills piled up, which you now need to sort through and address. You've been working through the pile of paperwork for an hour, and you are feeling increasingly stressed. So, what do you do? And again, this may be a good time to pause the recording and think through some options of how you could address these difficult emotions. You've hopefully generated some ideas by now of what you might do. Some examples could include taking a break from the paperwork so that you can take some time to maybe have a distraction or do an activity that you enjoy so that you're not feeling overwhelmed by this process. Pause briefly in the moment and practice some deep breathing or relaxation techniques just to help to calm yourself down from strong negative emotions. Or perhaps you can grab a cold glass of water from the refrigerator, and then to be able to pause and drink that may provide some relaxation as well. And you may want to think of some other examples in your own life where a situation seems overwhelming, potentially stressful, or causes you some level of sadness, anger, frustration, and to think about additional ways with those strong negative emotions. Now that we've looked at examples of both problem-focused and emotion-focused coping, let's look at one final example and try to combine the potential solutions that we could use. Your neighbor agreed to help you cut the grass, but every time you've asked them to help, they've said that they are too busy. So think through what are some both problem-focused strategies that you may use and emotion-focused coping strategies. Once again, this may be a good time to pause this recording to give you enough time to think through and talk through some of these potential coping strategies. Hopefully by now you've had the time to think through some of these, and perhaps an example of problem-focused coping could be to have a conversation with your neighbor to find an appropriate time or to schedule a time for them to mow your lawn. Or if that no longer works, you may want to look into different companies or lawn care companies who can mow the lawn for you. Or even try talking to your doctor to see if it's a safe and healthy option for you at the moment to be mowing the lawn, or to possibly mow the lawn in smaller stages rather than doing it all at once. Some other examples of emotion-focused coping could include, for instance, if you're feeling weighed down by a sense of a loss of independence and not being able to mow the lawn for yourself anymore. This may be something good to bring up with a friend or family member to discuss some of the frustrations that you're having, or again, possibly just to take some time to deep breathe or to do an activity that you enjoy, such as going for a walk or listening to some of your favorite music, and in doing so, to reduce some of these strong negative emotions that are distracting you in the moment. So in conclusion, we want to remind you that as you're going through this process at cardiovascular and pulmonary rehabilitation, many challenges will come up. There are many that you are already faced with or will be faced with in the future. And these challenges require coping strategies and various different ways to address these challenges. And we know that a helpful way of thinking about coping strategies is in these two categories of problem-focused and emotion-focused coping. And just some final notes, problem-focused coping should almost always come first. And we know that there are many benefits to making behavior changes that are in line with your health goals. And if you're either unaware of some of the health changes that you can be making at this time, that would be a great thing to discuss with your staff, just to make sure that you're setting appropriate goals. Also, we want to make sure that you find safe and effective ways to address difficult emotions. So in instances of feeling overwhelmed, sad, or frustrated throughout this process, we would encourage you to really find these strategies that are going to work for you. And that may include a number of different things. But again, it's all about finding ways that work personally for you. So thank you for your participation and engagement throughout today's discussion on coping with chronic illness. We hope you've learned a lot about problem-focused and emotion-focused coping. And please, if you have any questions at all, we encourage you to reach out to a staff member so that you can have some answers or solutions to the questions that you might have. Thank you.